It's that time of the year where the mice become really, really annoying. And what do I mean by really, really annoying? Well, people start noticing them. The cold kind of pushes them into the house. Not only does it push the mice into the house, they want to get cozy. They want to take advantage of your central air and heating system. So what do? They get underneath that insulation and they scratch around. And that's kind of annoying. And here's why it's especially annoying. Most people don't hear the mice until nighttime. Now, it's not that mice are purely nocturnal. They are mostly nocturnal. But here's what happens in a house. Houses tend to be active places. People watch TV. They cook. They clean. They have kids. They have pets. There's traffic outside. There's people doing yard work. There's next door neighbor having their house remodeled. So there's background noises outside. There's background noises inside. And nobody notices the mice during the daytime. But at night, everything's shut off. It's quiet. Everyone's trying to sleep. That faint scratching you couldn't hear in the daytime, it's really loud at night. So people jump to the conclusion that they have squirrels or raccoons in their attic because they have scratching in the corner of their room, when all it is probably a mouse up there. So I want to give you some tips to help you diagnose some of your critter issues. It'll help you determine whether it's mouse or if it's something bigger. So the first thing to pay attention to is the scratching. Scratching doesn't mean wildlife, and it doesn't necessarily mean mouse, but most of the time it indicates mice. And the key to the scratching is localized. If you have one room in your house where you consistently hear scratching in one particular area of that room and nowhere else, that's probably mouse. The big difference with mice and, let's say, a raccoon or squirrels is the squirrels and raccoon, you can hear them travel. You can hear them go from one side of the room to the other. The mice, you generally don't hear that. You just have localized scratching in one room. Another giveaway that you have wildlife versus mice is the consistency of the activity. Raccoons and squirrels, in particular the squirrels, you can almost set your watch by their activity. Squirrels are living in the house. They're coming and going from the house multiple times a day. It's very consistent. Raccoons might be coming to your house every day, but they're at least visiting once a week. And they usually go in the same areas of the house when they visit. Sometimes they're there every day, though. And their noise is very heavy, and it's kind of a shuffling sound, and very consistent. Now, the mouse activity is very inconsistent. Many people will say, well, I heard it for 2 or 3 days, and then it stopped for 2 weeks. And then it started up again for a couple days, or just one day. And then it stopped. Another thing to do to kind of help diagnose the problem is not only pay attention to the frequency of activity, the location of the activity, but generally with wild animals, you're going to have something on the outside of the house to give it away. So if you walk around the house, take a look up, and see if there's any damage. You might have a little hole in the fascia board. You might have some bent soffit. You might have some stains on the soffit. Maybe even stains on the siding, or paw prints. Now when I say paw prints, you're not going to see a good clear paw print. It looks more like dirty smudges, maybe on the corner of the house, maybe on the downspouts. Those are another indicators you might have wildlife versus mice. Because the mice, you're not going to have that. Now if you do decide to go into the attic and inspect for wildlife activity, the raccoons and squirrels are going to trample the insulation very thin. They're going to beat it down because they're heavy. I mean, we don't think of a squirrel as a heavy animal, but the body of a squirrel is this long, and it might be that big around. So you're talking about an animal that probably gets up to right around a pound, maybe a little more weight. And so they're going to compact that insulation. Whereas a big mouse is about that long. Its body, maybe that big around, very lightweight. When mice walk on the insulation, they do not compact it. They walk on top of it. You'll get little grooves in the insulation where they walk, but they're not going to flatten it all the way down to the drywall. So if you got insulation this deep, the mice might compress it that much. The squirrels will compress it down to like this. Same with the raccoons. So if you go up in your attic and you look, and all your insulation is compacted, you've got wildlife. If your insulation looks kind of lumpy, like you got little squiggly lines going through it, but it's still nice and fluffy, that's mice. So those are some things to look for. But the first thing to do is, if you hear this activity, just be patient. Pay attention to it for a week. If the noises aren't going away, then consider calling someone. If you hear a noise one time, I wouldn't call anybody. I would give it some time. And at this time of the year when it's getting cold, the mouse activity increases. They're digging down through that insulation to get to the drywall to warm up. And that's why people are hearing the scratching. Now, on first floor rooms where there's no insulation on the ceiling, you can actually hear the mice walking around. It'll be very faint. You won't notice it in the daytime, but at night, you'll notice it if the entire house is nice and quiet and still and you can't sleep. So, to save me some time and to save you some time, I would do these things. When you hear the activity, be patient, listen for a while, and develop a good description of what you hear. If you hear the scratching in one corner of the house, just maybe one room, it doesn't go anywhere, you probably have mice. But if you hear the walking across the ceiling, you could have squirrels or raccoons or something else up there. So those are the things I would listen for. And I would listen to those noises for a few days, at least a week. A week, you might hear some changes, or it could just go away. But if it doesn't go away after a week, you probably have wildlife. And us wildlife guys, we like to ask a lot of questions of you, the customer, because the more we can learn from you, the more we can better prepare to do our job when we show up. Because based upon your answers, I can determine whether you have squirrels, raccoons, or mice. Over the phone, we can usually diagnose the problem. That's why we say, hey, give us a call, ask us some questions, maybe we can help you out, and it will save you some time, and it might save us some time. By talking to you over the phone, I can determine a lot of times if you have mice, and I'll recommend call a pest control guy. By talking to you over the phone, I can determine if you have wildlife. And the more information that you can acquire and then pass on to me, the more effective I can be at taking care of your problem, or possibly recommend a pest control guy to take care of your problem. So take your time, pay attention to what's going on, give it a few days, and pay attention to the type of noise. The type of noise is very important. Thank you.